I'm here today at Club Fortified with owner and creator Tamas Finta, and I'm really excited this opportunity to have a discussion with Tamas. He has been a recent coach of mine and helped me really rebuild my body after injury, and he has a specialisation in working with over 40s, so I was definitely glad to find him. Today I'd love to start, Tamas, by just introducing the people at home to you with a little bit of an insight into your background. I remember the first time I came into your studio, I looked at all of these certifications from so many disciplines and realised that your interest in movement was really diverse. So would you like to share a little bit about your background with us?
Sure. Hi everyone, and Renae, thanks for the opportunity to talk about my life and passion, which is helping people move better, feel better, get stronger, become pain-free. So all of the good things. My background, I've been pretty actively exercising since I was 12 years old. Started with martial arts, and then being a skinny kid and with my insecurities, I found the gym to build some muscle. And then that was pretty much in my 20s, early 30s, it was all about lifting weights and building more muscle until I went to a kettlebell workshop and realized how much of my movement ability was gone. Lost it somewhere between doing martial arts for many, many years. Through lifting weights, I couldn't really move as well anymore. I was, big and very confident, but it was a very humbling experience to do the kettlebell workshop. And so that's in my mid-30s, and then so the last 15 years pretty much has been about functional movement, regaining mobility, maintaining mobility, which as we get a bit older, just maintaining it is a pretty tall order, which I always try to explain to my clients how you can't just push and push and push. As we get older, the focus needs to shift, more balance, more recovery, more mobility, more flexibility. So it needs to, thinking about training needs to change.
You don't seem to get away with what you did in your 20s and 30s, do you?
No,
as you get
no,
older?
certainly not.
And so was some of your personal experience behind the concept of Club Fortified and what you hope to offer?
So the concept of Fortified first, which was an online program for men over 40. And then this year it actually grew a little bit, and now we offer the same concept, the same philosophy to men and women. It was when I was about 42, 43, and doing my usual things, my kettlebell swings, pull-ups and handstands, and I was getting a few people who were a bit older, not just the young people who wanted to build muscle and get stronger, but had a few clients who were in their 40s. And all of a sudden, we had a bit of a barrier, because my usual strategies and techniques and training programs didn't seem to work as well anymore, because those guys were lacking stability, mobility. They had a job that required them to sit behind the desk for 8-9 hours and then a long drive home. And they came to the studio and asked them to do Turkish get-up and with a kettlebell, and it was a real challenge because they just couldn't do it. Even though I thought I was breaking it down all right and giving them progressions, sometimes we got stopped because their wrist just wouldn't bend. So how do you do anything on the floor with your body if your wrists can't take the stress? And that's the whole plan is up in flames. So I really started to change my approach and started to study a lot more and went to courses that offered more knowledge and more options to help people unlock these problems, to take the shackles off or take the handbrake off.
So what did you identify with some of the key challenges for an older population? You mentioned stability, mobility.
Yeah, so let's start with the physical ones.
Yeah.
Certainly ankles, toes and ankles are very often completely dysfunctional because of years spent wearing fashion focused shoes rather than functional footwear. Yes, so shoes that are too narrow, pushing the toes together so people lose the space between their toes. Shoes that are elevated under the heel, whether it's stilettos or even guys' business shoes, they have a heel. Even the running shoes have elevated heels. So none of that is functional. None of that is healthy. So from the feet, knees will suffer, right? If you have dysfunctional feet, your knees will suffer, and then your hips will suffer because of your feet and because you sit all the time. So the hips are pretty much copying it double. And so hip mobility, internal external rotation of the hips, for most people with an office job, most people with a sitting job, forget about internal external rotation of the hip joint. It just doesn't work anymore. And they also really struggle with getting full hip extension, which brings on another problem, which is lack of activation of the glutes. Without that, obviously, we have no support for the lumbar-pelvic area. Very hard to produce force in a lot of movements without the glutes. So that's a huge issue. And then, of course, then we come up to problem number one, low back pain.
And low back pain is so prevalent in over 40s, and I guess what we're seeing is a compounding effect of lifestyle.
Yes.
And occupational health hazards that are just interweaved into our modern day lives, or a complexity of past injuries that were never recovered from on top of that. So it's a very complex thing working with older populations, and I think for many instructors they can actually feel quite inept in how to manage it, because as you expressed the first time you came to it, you're like, what do I do? My class plan's not going to work if they can't be on their all fours.
Yes.
And in similar situations in the aerial hammock, instructors might come up with that if there is strong strength deficits, a big strength deficit, or flexibility challenges in terms of knowing how do I approach this. So from your perspective, what do you think are some of the key programming design elements that are really important to include, even if it's working from the floor before we get to other apparatuses or weighted work? What would you put down as your priority in a program design for over 40s as a generalization?
Well, that's a really good question. And just before we get into that, can I just go back? You made a really good point with all these past injuries. So every time I see a new client, obviously we go through the assessment, ask them to give me all the information that I should be aware of about past injuries, any medical condition. And I ask them 2 or 3 times, is that all? And very confidently they say, yes, that's all. So we begin to do the movement assessment, and we get into a position, oh yes, I had a car accident 5 years ago, I forgot to mention, you forgot to mention a car accident. Okay, so what happened? I had a whiplash. Okay, so let's move on. So what's looking at ankle mobility? So I see the person's feet do not rotate equal amount. So have you had any injuries on your right ankle? Oh yeah, I rolled my ankle 3 years ago when hiking. I forgot to mention that. So do not trust their form. Okay, questionnaires are great. It's a start. So that's why I use the movement assessment, which is a series of very simple movements to look for asymmetries, because the body will talk to me. The mouth doesn't talk to me, doesn't tell me everything. The body will tell me everything. So look for asymmetries, look for any sign of discomfort or pain. Because remember, a lot of 40-plus people have not actually sat on the floor. Maybe they haven't sat on the floor for years. So first time you sit them on the floor in a shin box or a 90-90, that's a whole new position for them. So they think they're okay, until you put them in that position, and it is news to them, not just to you. It's news to them that their butt cheeks aren't touching the floor on both sides. So they actually can't tell you everything because they don't know. So with this movement assessment, what I first look for are red flags. So what are the red flags? Pain. We don't go there. Any position movement that provokes pain is a no-go zone, because we are just retraining the nervous system, the brain, to react to that position with the pain signal over and over again. So we stay away from pain. That's a hugely important factor. And so we red flag what we can work with, what movements that are like between 1 and 10, scale between 1 and 10, what can we do that's 3 or less? So we'll do those first. And
3 or less in the scale of pain.
Yeah, so if 10 is excruciating pain, what do we have? What sort of past injuries or limitations we have that only 3 or less than 3? If there's more, referring out is probably a very good idea with that problem. So we start breaking down those issues, and that's the physical side. And don't forget, the pain experience is very powerful. So oftentimes injury has healed, but the brain remembers how that injury happened in the first place, and the person is quite fearful of those positions, of those movements. So very often we need to break through that psychological barrier as much as we have to break through the physical barrier.
The combination of working through someone's mental challenge and physical challenge, I guess, can also become more and more rigid as we are older, because we have simply lived in that way of being for longer.
Absolutely.
But perhaps also coming with other more extreme experiences of fatigue. And whether that's fatigue from work or managing family life, not actually having prioritized health for a long time with the other demands of juggling those things. And I think managing the loading that you give in a client's session is something that you do very well, to always monitor that they're never getting pushed to a place where they wouldn't recover easily. So I've noticed that is certainly something in your program design, where you're always monitoring your clients and checking in throughout a session on what's happening on that mental level of fatigue, but also on the physical level.
There's a really good system. That's not my invention. I picked it up from a very, very smart guy called Scott Sonnen. His criteria is perceived effort from the person should be 80% or over, which means they committed, they are mindful of the exercise or whatever they do. The level of technique, 80 and over. So we don't allow any movements or repetitions that drop below 80%, because obviously they're not very productive, not learning the right movement pattern, and the risk of injury is obviously a lot higher.
So 80% of good form.
Over 9. So I'd say between 1 and 10, 9 and over for technique. So it's and what a person feels as perceived effort, it's different for everyone, right? So for some people, getting up and down just body weight could be a huge challenge. Other person can do a 32-kilo Turkish get-up using same amount of effort at their own level. So that's why it's important to mention perceived effort of that person, because we don't want to compare two totally different people to each other. Before I forget, just had that other thing in my mind. I used to be this hardcore guy, right? Like you come in, you make sure you leave.
I always saw a bit of Arnold there.
you get down on the ground and leave it all on the floor. I love to look around at the end of the session and seeing people lying on their back in a puddle of water. There's sweat, and over 40, they have so much stress going on for most people, family, work, kids. exercise is a stressor as well, but it should be a positive stress, not a negative stress. And I've noticed that some of my clients can only really get into the session when I sort of turn off the stress switch in their brain, which we can achieve really well with some playful games, not taking ourselves too seriously, have some laugh, and you can see the shoulders dropping and they go back, and the facial muscles relaxing, and the upper trapezius and all your neck muscles and everything. So breathing exercise at the start was something playful, because these guys are not 20-year-old and 25. They don't pump themselves up all the whole day preparing for smashing the weights or smashing the burpees or smashing the rope climb. These guys come from a stressful environment already. We don't just throw them into more stress. So let's get them out of their head, and they really do appreciate that. They can see the change. The words they use, the face, the breathing. I think it's very, very important.
I noticed a lot of things you describe sound very individualized in terms of your either observational assessment of a client or judging their capacity on any given day. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, how important is moving away from large general classes once you're over 40 and moving perhaps more into where you're getting perhaps a more therapeutic or personalized approach in a fitness or health orientated guidance relationship with your coach?
Yep.
How important do you think that is?
Super important. It's a bit like saying that the carnivore diet is the best diet, or the keto diet is the best diet, or fasting is the best way to get fitter and healthier. We are different. Everyone has a different experience through their lives. Different things happen to them, different emotions. They're in a different headspace. You can't say to everyone that you have to gotta do this sort of class. We have 40 people in. You're all gonna get fitter, all gonna get stronger, all gonna happier. 20 will, and the other 20 will not. So generalized approach, especially to over 40 population, is not gonna work. That's why we do individual assessment. There are obviously some rules, general rules. So lack of mobility, high stress, you can bank on those two pretty much. But if you don't offer some personalized program, personalized approach to each and every individual in that class, you will have people disappearing for different reasons.
I certainly have felt the same from personal experience, both as an instructor and in my own body, in terms of the needs that I had not being able to be met in a general class.
Yeah.
And if I did try to keep up with the general protocol, 6 weeks later I had an injury. So yes. I knew I needed something that was specific from my body and perhaps specific for each different day. Some of the key things you've mentioned with over 40s having challenges with mobility and stability and also de-stressing is something where I see such the fusion window for the aerial hammock to be utilised as a prelude into other floor-based stability or body weight training exercises in terms of getting that mobility back, encouraging consciousness of the body through different contact and experiences in space and motion, and if necessary, decompression before building up those stability stages. From your experience in the hammock, what have you found are the benefits in your own body, or how you could see it might apply to some of the clients that you work with?
Our hammock is such an incredible experience, and I was talking about my younger self with the heavy deadlifts and pull-ups all day, and if you try to introduce a hammock into my training regimen back in that day, I would have politely declined and said, "No, that's probably it's more on it belongs to ladies' class or for other people." Little I knew, and learned a lot, experienced a lot, got a bit older. When I did my first hammock session, I could not believe how my body felt. it's like yin and yang. You do your hard training, you have to make sure that you do something to compensate, to de-stress, to deload, to release. And I use foam roller, and it's okay, and massage balls. I don't get that really deep release. That just, we did a session with Renae earlier this morning, and when we finished, I said, I have to kneel down. I have to sit on the ground for a bit. I'm just too loose. I'm not safe standing up. So it took me a few minutes to gather myself. Especially when someone is stressed, both psychologically and physically, a hammock just turns it off for me. I can feel it. You can't not focus on what you're doing, because a lot of the times you're a little bit suspended. Sometimes you're inverted. It's a bit like kettlebells for me. That's why I love kettlebells so much, because you cannot not think about what you're doing. You can't just watch a screen or watch the news while you're doing it. You need to be engaged. Yeah, you have to engage. And the hammock is pretty much the same thing. You need to engage. So you will forget about all the noise and all the bad things out there. You can have your 45 or minutes or 60 minutes just to yourself, and you get so much benefit, both mentally and physically. I absolutely love how I feel after the hammock sessions.
Well, I think it's a perfect complement to stability and body weight training in terms of getting back to our natural playful abilities, the things we did when we were children, and that we need to relearn often as we get older.
And one more thing, if I may add, especially with guys. So guys are even more my area than the ladies. So for this, we're not very smart, not a smart gender. We are programmed to protect, to hunt. So we don't really think that we need any help with anything. So we will refuse. So that's why we get lost all the time. That's why we can't find anything in the fridge. So with guys, it's a bit harder, but to convince them that more push-ups is not better, more squats is not better, moving better is better. And I think if we can argue from the perspective that if you do a bit of hammock, do a bit of this, you can do your hard training without pain. You can do it for many, many years, so it's longevity as well. So I'm not asking you not to be manly. I'm just asking you to be a bit smarter about how we're doing this, because I guarantee if you have a guy with bigger muscles, they will struggle with the hammock. They will sweat, and we don't like, us guys, especially the ones that think they're strong or they're actually strong, we don't like being reminded or being shown, being caught out on our weaknesses. So if you handle that well and they're intelligent enough to okay, well, yeah, I think my instructor is pretty much bang on. They're right. I need this as well. They will be with you for so many years, because they realize what you do with them, with the hammock, lets them do all of the manly stuff.
And it's all about being able to do what you want to do for longer.
Exactly.
And definitely giving people a way to not do too much too fast when they're first coming to any modality, whether it's the aerial or any other form of fitness, I think is key, but particularly so important if we're working with older populations. Just from all the history you've shared in terms of the time needed to regain the basics of functional movement, mobility, stability, before we start demanding more stress from the physical body. So thank you, Tamas.
My absolute pleasure.
Definitely looking forward to coming to my class with you tonight.
I am looking forward to my next hammock session.
And it's a perfect fusion, so thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, and thanks to you guys as well.
Yay! Cool. Good.